Welcome into Teal the Show. It is the final episode of this year's football season. I'm Jamal Saints here alongside Frank Frangie. Frank, it has been a fun ride to get here, but the Jaguars just couldn't stretch it into February this go around.
I'll tell you what, it's been one of the best rides in their 28 years. I'll tell you that. Of all the years they've had a team, this is one of the best experiences they've had. A home playoff game. They haven't had very many of those. Winning a home playoff game. They're 4-1 now, by the way, in home playoff games. I think it feels fantastic. This was a magnificent year for the Jags, for their fans, and we can't wait for what's to come.
It was kind of a bittersweet ending, of course, but the excitement is growing as we head to next year. So we're going to kind of look a little bit forward. You know, in the NFL season this week, it's championship weekend. Of the 4 teams that are left, 3 of them are run by quarterbacks that are still on that rookie deal. So I think when people start to look at where the Jaguars' window of opportunity is, it's kind of open now-ish, Frank, because you really want to be able to take advantage of the roster construction flexibility you have while Trevor's on that rookie deal.
Well, it looks like that's where the game has gone. If you follow the sport, yes, Tom Brady might play again. Aaron Rodgers is going to play somewhere, but it's gone to the young quarterback. Patrick Mahomes is 27 years old, and he's the oldest guy in this group. He's older than Burrow. He's older than Josh Allen. He's older than Trevor, obviously older than Brock Purdy. He's older than Jalen Hurts. He's the oldest guy in the group. So when you have one of those young quarterbacks and all the rage is that young quarterback, that's when you have your window. Now, the window lasts for a while now. Patrick Mahomes is going to be doing this in another 5 years. Trevor probably for another 10 years. He's only 23 years old, but this is the window. You've got the coach. You've got the quarterback. Now is when you move forward, particularly when you have a quarterback that young, and you're right, on that rookie deal.
Now, in order for the Jaguars to be able to kind of move forward, they're going to need some growth from some of their young players, including Trevor Lawrence, of course. I think we saw a lot. We saw consistent success down the tail part of the season. We need to see it over the course of an entire year. So I think right now we can say, you know, Trevor's stepped up into that top maybe third of the league.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. And but the question, we don't think he's reached his ceiling yet. We need him to take another step to really be a part of that elite group definitively in the NFL.
I think he's going to. I think he's in the top 5 or 6, maybe top 7 quarterbacks in the league, and I think most people would tell you that, and he's only going to get better. He now has a full offseason with Doug Peterson. He now understands, remember, he just learned the offense. He just learned his new guys. I mean, Christian Kirk and Zay Jones and Evan Ingram weren't here, so he just learned them. Now he's got a whole offseason with those guys. He will get better, but other young guys have to get better. Remember, Trayvon Walker played a big role. Devin Lloyd played a big role. Travis Etienne, this was really his rookie year, even though we didn't call it that because he didn't play the first year. So these young guys really have to step up and get better. When you have that many really young guys in that many critical roles, them going from year 1 to year 2 is critical, and I'm excited to see what they become.
If you had to pick one guy outside of Trevor Lawrence to take a big step going into the next season, who would it be?
It's got to be Trayvon. It's got to be Trayvon Walker. I mean, he was the first overall pick in the draft. When you're the first overall pick, you have to step up and you have to be that guy. They've got to figure out what he is. We've had that talk before, Jamal. Is he a hand-on-the-ground lineman? Is he a stand-up linebacker? Is he a bit of a hybrid? They're still trying to figure that out. His hand was on the ground at Georgia. He stood up most of the time here. Figure out what he is, but he's got to take that big step. The first overall pick in the draft has to be a big-time player for you, and he's got to take that step.
Yeah, and that step would go a long way to helping the Jaguars, especially when you start to look at the salary cap kind of constraints that they're under, especially if they try to keep some of their free agent players. We'll talk a little bit more about free agency. We'll bring in ESPN's Mike Duraco to help clear up the air on what the Jaguars might do this offseason as far as keeping some of their own guys. That's straight ahead when Teal the Show returns. Welcome back into Teal the Show. We've now got ESPN's Michael Duraco here, who's been covering the Jaguars all year long. Mike, it's been an interesting year. I'd say a lot smoother sailing year than what we had just a year ago. Doug Peterson's done a phenomenal job steadying the ship here. He's one of the finalists for the Coach of the Year award. I think just about everybody that's been covering the Jaguars for any length of time says that he should probably win that award, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I know it's supposed to be basically this year, but you have to look at where the franchise was at the end of last season. And you have to look at the dysfunction, you have to look at the atmosphere in the building, and it's not just the wins and losses that Doug Peterson has fixed. It's all of that other stuff. And he's built a culture here that guys want to be a part of. And, oh, by the way, Trevor Lawrence is now the elite quarterback we all thought he was going to be. So you have to factor all that in, and I know there's some other worthy candidates, but if you pay attention to where this franchise has been and where they're headed now, Doug Peterson is by far the most responsible for that. And you know, I don't know if he's going to win it. He probably won't, but he really should.
The culture shift around this team in just 1 year, I mean, through the roof. To think about how far things have gone in just one season just kind of encapsulates what Doug Peterson's really been able to do with this team. I mean, getting a team that's picked back-to-back #1 overall into the playoffs is a huge undertaking in and of itself. All right, the team did make the playoffs this year, and a lot of people are expecting that this is going to be the start of maybe a run that gets them into the playoffs consistently over the next few years. But there are some needs this offseason, some big-time free agents, guys like Jawan Taylor, Evan Ingram, Arden Key. If you could only keep one of the Jaguars' kind of priority free agents, which one would you select?
Evan Ingram, without even questioning it, because I know what I'm going to get from him. I don't really have anything behind Evan Ingram right now. Everyone else is also a free agent except Luke Farrell. So you really only have one tight end under contract. I know that guy is a huge part of the offense. I know that he makes Trevor comfortable. You have Walker Little that you can slide over to right tackle, and he can take over for Jawan Taylor if needed. I know those two are their top two priorities, Jawan Taylor and Evan Ingram, but if it's me and I can only have one, I'm going to take the guy Trevor throws the ball to.
Yeah. And Evan Ingram took that one-year prove-it deal, came to Jacksonville, and he proved it. And not only on the field, I think what maybe some people miss in this is, we're around the team a little bit more. The leadership that he's brought off the field into that locker room, the presence alone is kind of worth some of the things, especially when you talk about building a culture here in Jacksonville. He's one of those guys that could be a culture setter of sorts.
Yeah, and if you talk to Evan, it's really evident that how unhappy he was with the Giants. He talks about dark days in the first 5 years or 4 years of his career in New York, and he just was not happy there. And he will tell you flat out right now, I found a home here. I love it here. I want to come back here, and it goes beyond just being a big focal point of that offense. It's the way he feels about Trevor. It's the way he feels about Doug. And it just, it's all the things that we love about Jacksonville, he now loves as well. And he's a guy in that locker room that a lot of guys look up to. And he's one of those tone setters. You're right.
Yeah, this year they've been able to kind of find a lot of success, or they were able to find a lot of success this past season. But as we kind of look ahead to next year, there are still some holes in this roster. When you kind of look at the roster, maybe outside of the tight end, because we know there's just no bodies there right now, what's the biggest need that they have to address?
Pass rush. I think we saw that in the second half of the game against the Chiefs. They got to Patrick Mahomes, who was basically playing on 1.5 legs. They pressured him only 3 times in that entire second half when he couldn't move left, right. I mean, they just could not win one-on-ones. They could not get through, didn't blitz effectively. That's got to be the #1 priority, because you generally build your teams to win your division. And I guess the prevailing thought on that was that's why you're drafting all those linebackers, because you got to stop Derrick Henry, you got to stop Jonathan Taylor. But if you want to go beyond that, you've got to stop Joe Burrow and Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody, Tua, whoever. You have got to build your team to beat those teams, and the way you do it is you rush the passer and cover. And, that's priority number 2, by the way, finding another corner.
Right. Yeah, there are some big-time things on that defense. The defense was able to get a lot of takeaways, but they gave up a lot of yards in the process. Got to find a nickel guy to kind of replace Trey Herndon, who's also a free agent, by the way. And that pass rush, you hope that Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen can kind of take steps forward to help kind of energize that pass rush, but you still have to add more bodies to that, because, I mean, it's kind of like you talk about with depth at other positions. You need depth at pass rush. You got to have at least 3 guys that can really get after it. Arden Key, Dewan Smoot both gave you something this year, but you need something else on top of that. You need another guy that teams are kind of worried about.
Right, and I don't know that they're going to be able to find it where they're picking in the draft and where they're standing cap-wise in free agency, because elite pass rushers don't hit free agency. No. They just don't. So, and I don't know if Arden Key's coming back. He said he wants to come back too, but he's, 27 years old? He's going to be 27 years old. He's a young pass rusher. If you look at the free agency class, the pass rushers are all 30 and up. He's going to draw a lot of interest from a lot of teams. Dewan Smoot, you should be able to get back on a reasonable deal because he's coming off the Achilles injury, but it may just be another season of you're going to have to try and manufacture it somewhere.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sure that Arden Key is going to come as cheap as some people are envisioning him, just because it is such a bad free agent class of those pass rushers and the age that he's in, and he's now produced in back-to-back seasons after kind of getting a slow start to his career. Somebody's going to look at him and say, oh, I need pass rush help too, and offer him a contract. And the question is, do the Jaguars really want to invest? How heavily do they want to invest in him? But answers are hard to find at that position. Could the Jaguars try and draft someone at 25 that's a pass rusher again? Maybe, but the question is, all the really good ones are going to be off the board already.
Right.
So then what are you getting from this guy that you picked that late in the first round as a rookie? Because that's when you need them to be able to produce. You saw what Trayvon Walker kind of gave you early on in the career, and you're hoping that he takes a big step forward. But if you get another guy that gives you 3 or 4 sacks as a rookie season, that's not really energizing your pass rush.
Right, and look, Josh Allen has to be more consistent. We saw early in the season he was visible, and then for a big chunk of the middle of the season he was hard to find, and then he came on late. You need him to be the guy that came on late all year, and that will make up for a lot of it, but Trayvon Walker has to take a major step forward as well. And he, I asked Doug Peterson, I asked Trent Baalke about it, and they're both pleased with his effort, his physicality, his athleticism, the way he plays the run. But, man, you drafted him number 1 overall. He's got to get to the quarterback. And that goes hand in hand, too, with figuring out what they are defensively. Because I don't think we really know next year what they're going to be.
No, I think this defense is going to undergo some sort of shift this offseason. I think they kind of came into the year as a 3-4. We kind of saw it on the field start to shift more to that 4-3 look toward the end of the season. And I think even Arden Key, I asked him just right before the playoffs, I said, what energized the pass rush down the stretch? He said, we figured out that we're a 4-down team. And if the players are already saying that and they were embracing it toward the end of the season, you have to think that the coaching staff sees it and they're going to carry that and say, okay, well, what do we have to do to really embrace if we're this 4-down team, which maybe means some shifts or some different personnel on that defensive line group.
Yeah, and the thing of it is, too, is you're limited a little bit, obviously, by your personnel. But you should always match what you do to your personnel instead of trying to find the personnel to fit what you do. Get the good football players and then figure out how to use those guys. That is the essence of really good coaches. They get the talented guys, they figure out what they're good at, they ask them to do that and not what they're not good at, and then you have a functioning defense that makes plays here and there. And that's the other thing. They don't have enough playmakers on defense. No. Rayshon Jenkins had several really, really big plays, but when's the last time a corner made a big play? When's the last time one of those defensive ends made a big play? Yes, Josh Allen scoop and score. But the funny thing is we were always talking about Josh Allen's in coverage. What an awful way to use Josh Allen. If he's not in coverage, who knows where that ball goes? Maybe Arden Key gets it. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But, the bottom line is he was in coverage and scoop, score type of thing. But they need big plays defensively, and they need them more consistently.
That kind of leads us into another topic altogether. Do the Jaguars have enough, I guess you can say guys and dudes, do they have enough dudes out there that are really difference makers that going into the game that teams are like, okay, we have to find a way to stop him. We have to find a way to contain this guy. Or do they just have a bunch of players out there that kind of put it together? Because it doesn't seem like they have that one guy that really gives defensive coordinators or offensive coordinators nightmares.
I think they do to a degree on offense, because I do think you have to know where Travis Etienne is, even though they didn't use him very much in the pass game, and they really should. But Christian Kirk is that guy. Evan Ingram is, I think, definitely that guy, because that's the matchup issue that you can't get caught in. And defenses got caught in that a little bit as well. You can't have a linebacker on Evan Ingram. If you get caught with that, you're going to lose that 9 times out of 10. Defensively, though, you're right. I don't know that they have that guy. And maybe Josh Allen has been that guy at times, but he just needs to be that guy more consistently. Like, you need to know, you know what, it's 3rd and 8. We're clinging to a 3-point lead. They're at midfield. We need our guy to get in there and cause an incompletion, make a sack. Like, you need the Bradley Chubb, you need the Von Miller, you need the Aaron Donald in the Super Bowl last year that makes the big play when you need it the most. And I don't know that guy is there right now on this roster. Maybe that turns into Trayvon, but certainly Josh Allen has to do it a little more consistently.
All right. We'll talk, it'll kind of shift our focus to next year. This is our way too early next year. We brought Mike on during the bye week. He predicted some of the big wins down the stretch for the Jaguars. The Jaguars now have to shift from being the hunter to the hunted. Since they won the division, they have that first place schedule, so it's going to be a tough road. How many wins do you think they can get next year?
Wow, it'll put me on the spot here. It is the first place schedule, which means Buffalo, which means Kansas City. They also have Baltimore coming in. They have San Francisco as well. You're looking at a significantly tougher schedule. So they may be a better team than they are this year, but their number of wins may not be that much. I think if they get to 10 wins next year, I think that's a pretty good let me rephrase that. I think that's a really good year for this team, considering the teams that they're going to have to play. You know, they've also got Cincinnati on the schedule. It's tough. But that's what happens when you win. You get a tougher schedule. And they're still the best team in the AFC South by far. And, you know, it doesn't even matter to me, like, if Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers goes ahead and signs with Tennessee or Indy. I still think overall talent-wise, they're the best team in the AFC. So, but boy, you know, 10, 11 wins, I think, would be fantastic against that schedule.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that they can kind of take solace in, is that the AFC South as a whole is still going to be down. I mean, there's going to be a lot of influx of new coaches coming in. More than likely, you end up with at least 2 new quarterbacks in the division, maybe 3 new quarterbacks in the division. So there are going to be a lot of changes, and some teams, the Titans may be a team that's starting a rebuild. The Colts and Texans are kind of in soft rebuilds now. So overall, they should be positioned to be able to dominate the division, which gets you into the postseason, and ultimately that's what matters.
Right, and get you that home playoff game, which is important.
Right.
But obviously, you know, their eyes are further. Their eyes are at the Chiefs and the Bengals and the Bills, and, you know, that's the teams that they really need to have the mindset that they're competing with, and to do that, you need more playmakers on offense, you need playmakers on defense, and you know, if they can draft well, you know, they're not going to be big players in free agency. They don't really have a lot of money available even after they clear some cap room. And Trent Baalke has told us, I don't want to be a big spender in free agency anymore. I want to be a bargain guy where I can find guys that can help and fit roles that we need. So that means you have to draft well. And if they can draft well and find a couple of those guys, then they got a chance.
Yeah, it should be an interesting season next year. Definitely a high bar set for Doug Peterson, since we know in his second year in Philadelphia he won a Super Bowl.
Won it all, yeah.
So some kind of way he has to find a way to top that here in Jacksonville. It'll be fun. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thanks.
All right, Frank. So the big thing from Mike was that he thinks the Jaguars will have failed the offseason if they don't bring back Evan Ingram. I tend to agree with him just because of what Evan Ingram means to that locker room, the things that he brought out on the football field, and the comfort level of having the majority of the same weapons back would have for the offense and Trevor Lawrence.
I don't think there's any chance they're not going to have Evan Ingram. So I don't think what Mike points out is going to happen. I don't think there's any way that's going to happen. Position A is extend him. Get an extension so you can amortize the dollars a little bit. If you can't get that done, you've got to franchise him. You got to put a tag on him. They don't want to use a tag. Nobody wants it to come to that. But if you have to tag him, you tag him. Now, all that money now counts toward next year, so it may cost you some other players, but you have to have Evan Ingram. There's no doubt in my mind, no doubt, that Evan Ingram's going to be on this football team next year, hopefully for a lot of years because they get an extension done, but without question, or a deal done, but without question, he's going to be on the team next year, even if he's playing under a tag. No doubt in my mind about that.
It's really key that players want to play for the Jaguars, and now they have to find a way to keep those players that want to be in Jacksonville. It's a stark difference from the way things were just a couple of years ago, where guys were like, I just want to get the biggest contract I can wherever it comes from.
Well, that's the whole thing, Jamal, and it's true. It's not just a bunch of broadcasters saying happy stuff.
Yeah.
The reality is the culture is so good, what Doug Peterson has built is so good, that not only do you have a lot of good young players, but you have a lot of good young players who like playing with each other, who like being on the same team, who like playing for Doug. So everybody wants it. Even guys they're not going to be able to bring back wish they could come back. You're going to see some of those guys that they can't bring back everybody. So you're going to see some guys who they have to move on from, who are going to be disappointed that they're not part of the party. So, I mean, I really believe that. That's how good the culture is in that locker room. And I can't wait to see them start to build this thing, see what it becomes.
All right, that'll pretty much do it for us here at Teal the Show. This is a season in the books, Frank. It's been a fun one. Glad that we got to share it with all the Jaguars fans out there. Appreciate the work from everyone behind the scenes that helped to make all of this happen. It's It's been a fun year.
It's been as good a year. I said it at the top. It's been as good a year as I can remember. Certainly in of the games that stand out for me, there's been more of those this year than I can remember. This has been a great year, and there's a lot more to do. I promise you, that's the narrative around the Jaguars, is that this is just the beginning, and I think that's very real.
Just the beginning, and it should be a fun offseason and a fun next year, but that'll do it for this season's Teal the Shows. Thank you at home for tuning in. Good night.